As great as the 2019 NASCAR season was, it left me with a sour taste. While I had been a devoted fan for over a decade, my favorite team folding and my favorite driver finishing runner-up 2 years in a row had me disillusioned. I didn't care for the reduced horsepower or the over-reliance on aerodynamics, and plus, I had other stuff going on. It was my senior year of high school. I had prom, graduation, and all the festivities that came with. Or so I thought. It's hard to believe it's now been 5 years since the pandemic. So much has changed, and yet I can still picture it like it was just yesterday. My teachers trying to figure out how to use Zoom, my friends trying to play Among Us for the 30th day in a row, and the only thing left to pass the time was to make YouTube videos. In hindsight, good call on my part. It was a strange time, but I could take comfort in at least some semblance of normalcy returning to my life when it was announced that the first major American sport to make its return during the pandemic was NASCAR. Despite my earlier reservations, of course I had to tune in, and boy am I glad I did. Through every step of the way, from before to during to after the pandemic, 2020 was an unprecedented year for stock car racing. It was the year that reinvigorated my love for the sport, a year that, for better or worse, is why this video, along with most that came before it, have been made. From the astronomical highs to the unforeseeable lows, this year blew any and all projections out of the water as the single most unpredictable year in NASCAR history. But before I start giving you PTSD, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Incogni. In the digital world, it has never been easier for data brokers to sell your information and give you nothing but spam, spam, spam. I still get offers to apply to colleges, and I've been graduated for a year, and I bet I'm not alone. In fact, a report from the Identity Theft Resource Center showed a record number of compromises in 2023 and nearly the same amount in 2024. And that makes sense. By doing something as simple as signing a form or creating an account, things that are intrinsic to most services and apps today, you could be inadvertently giving your info to countless companies and leaving yourself vulnerable to data breaches. With so much leverage, these brokers could easily slip away. But thanks to Incogni, you can run them down. You see, unlike a VPN, which protects your information when you use public Wi-Fi, Incogni actively hunts down that information to have it removed from unknown databases. Here's what that might look like. Getting started with Incogni is easy as pie. Simply create an account, grant them permission to request data removals on your behalf, and watch your worries, as well as all those spam messages and calls, melt away. And it's not just a one-time deal either. Incogni routinely conducts automated scans to make sure your data stays solely with you. Within just minutes of signing up, I had almost 200 removal requests sent on my behalf. Something that, had I done manually, would have taken me 2.5 days. So if you want to be like me and take control of where your info goes, click the link in the description and use my code Elly Productions, all one word, ELLY Productions, to get 60% off an annual plan. Thanks again to Incogni for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to it. Hard to believe, but 2020 at one point was just like any other year, with the season starting off in Daytona for the 42nd running of the Busch Clash. With the previous year's iterations seeing rain, a really stupid wreck, and more rain, this year fans were hoping for more, and that's exactly what they got, if they were looking for more wrecks. Since I'm a time-traveling wizard, I've already made a whole video about this race, but to give you the cliff notes, 4 crashes, 3 overtime attempts, 12 of the 18 cars wrecked out in the final laps, and the winner's car looking like this. Easily the most anticipated race win diecast of all time. As for the rest of Speed Weeks, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., making his first start in the 47, took the pole, Joey Logano won the first duel, William Byron won the second, and just like that, the stage was set for another season of NASCAR racing. Although for one of the sport's greatest, it wasn't just another year. It would end up being his last. As had been known since literal days after the previous year's finale, Jimmie Johnson, the current active leader in wins and championships, announced his retirement from full-time Cup racing. Looking back on it now, it made sense. He was going through pretty much the only rough patch of his career, and we literally just saw him finish 3rd in the Daytona 500. He's doing just fine. But at the time, he felt like the last shoe to drop. First it was Jeff, then it was Tony, then Carl, Greg, Dale, Matt. Most of the men that had defined NASCAR racing in the decade before, all gone. And now it was Jimmy's turn to hang it up. But before he called it a career, he decided to run one last season in the 48, and he would start that season leading the field at Daytona. Unfortunately, he had to go back to his actual starting spot, and even more unfortunate was the rain that not only delayed the start of the race, but forced the heavy majority of it to be run the following day. Nevertheless, the race would get back underway the next day, and for the most part ran clean and green until there were 20 laps to go, when Kyle Busch, while leading, blew a motor, and then about 90 seconds later, some other cars experienced similar trouble, mostly because they smashed into each other heading into the turn. This set up a mad dash to the checkered, which saw 3 wrecks, 2 overtime attempts, and 1 last push to the finish. Lined up on the front row were 2 former winners of this race, Denny Hamlin and Ryan Newman, and behind them, a whole lot of hot shots, all in search of their first. One of those hot shots was Ryan Blaney, who used his momentum on the backstretch to push Newman out front. But instead of sticking with him, he fell back into the clutches of the now third-place Hamlin, and the idea was simple. Use the push from the 11 and slingshot past the 6. Easy peasy, but as most of those superstars from the past decade will tell you, one does not simply pass Ryan Newman. So we've got one Ryan on the attack and the other left to defend, but in the end, neither would wind up with the result they were looking for.
Here comes Hamlin up the outside.
Wow!
Crash into the wall, into the air goes Newman.
Upside down.
And comes to rest.
When Blaney gets out of the car, you can see the confliction on his face, the agony of losing the sport's biggest race by a matter of feet, mixed with the distress of not knowing if his competitor was all right. For the entire sport, even the team getting showered in confetti, it was a quiet night, full of prayers and well wishes, and thankfully, they would be heard. On the afternoon of February 16th, Ryan Newman was eating lunch with his parents. 72 hours later, he was walking out of the hospital with his daughters at his sides. He would go on to say that everything between those two memories was gone. He had no recollection of the race or how it ended. He couldn't remember seeing his family or receiving a call from the president. One moment he was eating shrimp on the beach, and the next he was in the hospital. Thankfully, he would go on to make a full recovery and even met with Blaney to share a laugh, but in the following race, while Blaney was leading with just 6 laps to go, Ross Chastain, Newman's substitute, spun out on the backstretch, effectively taking away Blaney's chance to win. So I guess he got his revenge? It would end up being the other Pennzoil car of Joey Logano who would score his 2nd win in the Sin City. And the following race would see even more heartbreak for Blaney, as a blown tire forced him onto pit road while Alex Bowman scooted away to just his 2nd career win. Then, in the desert sun of Phoenix, Blaney got his mulligan out of the way early, joining his teammate in a 3-car wreck. And once again, it was his other teammate, Joey Logano, picking up his 2nd win in the last 4 races, immediately establishing himself as a championship favorite. With so much momentum on his side so early on, who knows what he could have done had the season just continued like it had in every year before. But then, of course, March 11th happened, and whereas just a month ago, NASCAR had garnered eyes from all over the country, now those eyes were set everywhere else. Mostly on the NBA, where the first high-profile case of coronavirus was found in Utah Jazz center and professional microphone toucher Rudy Gobert. His game that night against the OKC Thunder was canceled, and 20 minutes later, the entire NBA was shut down. Soon followed the NHL, MLB, and of course, NASCAR. I don't know about you guys, but I remember this day vividly. It was like something out of a movie. Every event canceled, every business closed, everything was shut down basically in one day. Even our school musical that was set to open that night was postponed to a day that never came, and I still haven't touched a drum set since. Mainly because I don't have one, but still, what I'm trying to say is, it sucked. Though once the reality of these unprecedented times set in, attention was turned toward moving forward, toward finding a way to keep things moving. Originally, NASCAR wanted to run the next race at Atlanta as scheduled, just without fans, but that wasn't going to happen. So they needed something else to fill the TV time and, more importantly, galvanize a community that, like the rest of the world, felt uncertain about the future. And that's how it was decided that they would still race, just not on an actual track.
On Sunday, March 22nd, NASCAR iRacing and Fox Sports teamed up to deliver the first ever eNASCAR iRacing Pro Invitational Series event.
That's right, NASCAR went virtual. As one of the few sports with a transferable skill set to simulators, drivers hopped in their sim rigs, or some of them simply sat down at their computers, to run the first ever iRacing Pro Invitational, an esports event reserved exclusively for real-life drivers. And the first race was an absolute hit. Seeing otherwise unknown talents like Timmy Hill and Garrett Smithley run up front, while Jimmy Johnson emulated a troll on Xbox Live, sent NASCAR to the top of Twitter's trending tab and gifted Fox Sports with, to this day, the most watched esports broadcast ever. Originally, it was supposed to be a one and done, but after the success they had seen, NASCAR knew they had to do more. And let me tell you, while the circumstances that inspired it were a drag, this series was TV gold. We had Dale Jr. streaming on Twitch. We saw guys getting banned for intentionally wrecking each other. And most importantly, we had Clint Boyer.
Oh! Whoa! Come on, man! Oh, no!
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing. I'm not. Oh,
Clint.
no, Boyer.
What happened? I got bubbled.
Worth noting that they did bring this back the following year, and while it was still fun, doing it alongside real racing was kind of redundant. It was just different seeing people stuck so far apart come together to make something not for points or profit, but for the fans. As much fun as we were having with the video games, however, NASCAR was behind the scenes, trying to figure out how they could return to reality. Though compared to other sports, they had a considerable advantage. Football, baseball, basketball, all of the other major sports in the US involved close contact, which meant isolation, constant testing, making the athletes wear masks, and keeping them on closed sites like Walt Disney World. Lucky bastards. Which is all well and good, but that took months of planning and coordinating to even get off the ground, whereas NASCAR already had closed sites, and they already have masks, and the closest contact they have is between their bumpers. Racing, weirdly enough, seemed tailor-made to run under these conditions. As long as the personnel was limited and everyone could follow protocol, NASCAR was in a unique position to race during a worldwide pandemic. And that is exactly what they do. On April 30th, it was announced that the season would resume with a doubleheader at the Darlington Raceway, the first race of which would be branded the Real Heroes 400 in support of the healthcare workers that were so vital during this time. This would also be Ryan Newman's first race back since his crash, and taking over in the 42 car was Matt Kenseth? Okay, so I actually kind of forgot this happened, but all I'm going to say is, don't ask Kyle Larson how he got his ride in the 5. Filling the empty seat would be the 2003 Cup champion, as he made a shocking return to take up driving duties for Chip Ganassi and team back up with Kurt Busch for the first time in 15 years. And just like that, in front of grandstands that looked eerily similar to how they normally look, after 2 months, 8 days, 17 hours, and 22 minutes of waiting, the green flag would wave once again.
NASCAR is back. Trouble back straight away. Around goes the 47 on the very first lap, Ricky Stenhouse.
Oh yeah, NASCAR was back all right. They would take the green flag again on lap 7, and from there to the end of stage 1, it actually looked like Jimmy Johnson, who hadn't won a race in 3 years, had a chance to win the first race during the pandemic, or at the very least, win this stage by making just one more clean lap.
Too much, and he's also, Jimmy Johnson going around.
Into the wall hard.
Unbelievable, our leader.
Bit of subtle foreshadowing here. It would be his teammate William Byron who would reap the benefits of Johnson's misfortune, only to wind up imitating him later on. The cars ran so close to the wall that they ripped one of the decals clean off of it, and taking his first win of the year and 50th of his career was Kevin Harvick.
Man, I'm excited. You know, it is weird, just because there's nobody up there.
The following race would be the first to take place on a Wednesday since 1984, the first scheduled midweek race in nearly 4 decades. And man, do I wish they were still doing this today, but whatever. Aside from John Hunter Nemechek doing his best Ricky Stenhouse impression twice over, things kept on looking good. Of all people, it was Clint Boyer using his iRacing experience to dominate most of the race and notch both stage wins. Unfortunately, that experience also made for a disappointing end, opening the door for one William Clyde Chase Elliott II. At this point, he was still on the come-up, only a 6-time winner by his 5th year, still looking to break through to the next echelon of contention, but tonight he's got a good shot at notching number 7. That is until a poorly timed caution made way for more poorly timed cautions that forced him to pit. Still, he was able to navigate his way through the field, and with just 30 laps to go, had his sights set directly on the leader. If Jimmy Johnson couldn't get that storybook win, at least Elliott could. But lest we forget, this is 2020 and we can't have anything nice.
Wow, that did not work out for... Kyle Busch turns Chase Elliott.
Hard into the wall.
Oh boy.
It's easy to forget now that just a few years ago, the reigning champion Kyle Busch was still far and away the most hated driver in NASCAR. And for some reason, maybe to make sure a Toyota would win the Toyota 500, maybe a momentary lapse in understanding of the laws of physics and time, or maybe just because he was jealous, he blatantly wrecked the sport's most popular driver. Everyone was upset. I was upset. God was upset, as told by his tears falling on the track and ending the race early, gifting Denny Hamlin his first win of the year and pushing Elliott's quest for victory victory back by at least 4 more days. Holding a crown jewel race in front of empty grandstands feels like sacrilege, but it's what NASCAR had to do to keep the Memorial Day tradition of the Coca-Cola 600 alive. Another tradition that kept up was the rain, as it had followed the sport to Charlotte, resulted in another lengthy delay, as well as a mutilated umbrella, courtesy of Clint Boyer. He would treat his car similarly, forcing an early end to stage 1 that would see Alex Bowman out front, who would stay there for most of the night, also picking up the stage 2 win and just barely conceding the third stage to Joey Logano. Past there, however, it was once again Chase Elliott's race to lose, as he would take commanding control from Brad Keselowski. For the next 35 laps, it was all Elliott, destined for redemption after such disappointment. But with just 3 laps to go, of all people, it was Elliott's teammate, William Byron, who blew a tire and brought out the caution. And in a call I didn't understand then and still don't understand now, Alan Gustafson called his driver to pit while most of the others elected to stay. Sure, tires did make a big difference, but this was a lethal setback. He would have to pass 10 cars in 2 laps to take back the win, and unfortunately, he could only pass 8 of them, as Brad Keselowski, in what would end up being Miller Lite's final race in NASCAR, would give them one last victory. Once again, Chase Elliott had fallen short, and just to pour salt in the wound, Jimmy Johnson, who finished second, would fail post-race inspection, taking what would have been his final career runner-up and demoting him down to last place. If you were a Hendrick fan, this was about as low as you could be, and while Elliott's aspirations of winning the sport's longest race had failed, he would have another shot the very next day. In what I think is the only time this has ever happened, NASCAR scheduled 4 races across 4 days. Cup on Sunday, Trucks on Monday, Xfinity on Tuesday, and Cup again on Wednesday. In the truck race, Elliott got one back on Kyle Busch, even emulating his signature Selly. Busch would get him back in the next day's Xfinity race, and in the Wednesday Cup race, which had to be moved to Thursday because again, Mother Nature hates NASCAR, Chase Elliott finally collected that fateful first win of 2020. It might not have been the 600, but if there were fans in attendance, you can bet they would be going crazy. And with the season moving forward into a more traditional schedule, it finally felt like, if nothing else, at least NASCAR was getting back to a regular swing. Still getting used to those masks, though. The following race for Elliott wouldn't be so successful, as while he led a lot of laps and won both stages, he would wreck both himself and Joey Logano for the lead, allowing Brad Keselowski on fresh tires to sneak by and take his second win of the year. Doing the same thing in the following race was Kevin Harvick at Atlanta, and then on a Wednesday night showdown in Martinsville, vindicating his teammates' poor performances was Martin Truex, taking his first win with crew chief James Small. In Homestead, Chase Elliott once again led late, but in an act of revenge for Bristol, the lapped car of Joey Logano blocked him, allowing Denny Hamlin to pick up his 3rd win of the year. Also, Tyler Reddick forgot about the last lap.
Sorry, guys. Keep going! Keep going! Proud of all y'all. Go! It's the last lap, dog!
Then came Talladega, a race that, for being mostly unattended, had a lot of build-up for all the wrong reasons, and now is where we have to once again divert our attention to something more important than racing. Back to real life, where systematic racism breeds civil unrest. All across America, demonstrations and protests raged in response to racism and police brutality, a fight that NASCAR was sympathetic to. They showed displays of solidarity at Atlanta and Martinsville, banned a driver who used a racial slur, and on June 10th, the big one, they banned the Confederate flag from flying at their races. For as barbecue bless your heart sweet tea southern a motorsport like NASCAR, this was a big deal. It was like banning the Canadian flag from hockey games, if Canada was only a country for 4 years and fought for the right to enslave human beings, but to a lot of people, it was a big deal. So big that on race day in Talladega, Alabama, vendors sold memorabilia of the flag outside the track. An airplane circled the speedway with the flag in tow, along with a message that read, "Defund NASCAR." And on the day of the race, crew members of Bubba Wallace, the Cup Series lone black driver, arrived at their garage stall to find a noose hanging by the door. Of course, it was later investigated by the FBI and found to be a simple garage pole, no hate crime detected, but across all 29 tracks and the 1,684 garage stalls at those tracks, only 11 of them still had rope garage poles, and this one was the only one not tied in a traditional knot. So make of that what you will. Still, the results of the investigation were quite relieving. The only people allowed in the garage were NASCAR personnel, so any suspicion of prejudice coming from within was stomped out. And while many fans, mainly the ones on Facebook, weren't so complacent, the sport still made their stance clear when every man on every crew joined together to push Bubba's number 43 to the front of the grid. Even if no actual crime had been committed, they were still going to stand by their friend.
No one is white, black, brown, or yellow. They are all racers, and they are all our heroes.
Just like Jimmy in Daytona, sadly, Bubba did have to return to his real starting spot, though he would lead a few laps late in the running. Holding point in the end, however, was his best friend Ryan Blaney, trying to hold off a hard-charging Johnson and an even harder-charging Harvick.
Oh, Kevin Harvick to the inside turns Johnson.
Ah, damn, not again. With 1 to go, Harvick held P1, but mimicking his strategy in Daytona, Blaney held back, took a push, and took the lead. But what happened next probably didn't figure into his plan.
Eric Jones with help. Here comes Almirola. Crash into the wall. And Ryan Blaney wins Talladega. What a wild finish.
In back-to-back Talladega races, Ryan Blaney beat his competitor by 7 1/1000ths of a second, and both he and Bubba celebrated a day that the whole sport could be proud of.
This is truly incredible, and I'm proud to be a part of this sport, Jamie.
The following weekend at Pocono would see NASCAR's first ever doubleheader, with Kevin Harvick winning on Saturday and Denny Hamlin winning on Sunday, taking their 3rd and 4th wins respectively. It would come down to the same 2 drivers in the following week's Brickyard 400, a race that Jimmy Johnson had to skip, being out with the coronavirus. Ah, damn. Taking his place was Justin Allgaier, who did not have a good day, and neither did Blaney's tire changer Zach Price, but he would end up being okay. Back to Harvick and Hamlin, with less than 10 to go, they were running nose to tail, 1-2, the winningest drivers of the season so far. Coming off a win apiece, they were both looking to establish themselves as the title favorite, and it would all come down to this finish. Or rather, how much air was left in Denny's right front tire.
Hard into the wall. Denny Hamlin from the lead. Slams into the wall.
Of all people, Matt Kenseth would end up hounding Harvick for the win, but he'd have to settle for his final career runner-up, as Happy Harv would be all the more happy leaving Indy with an 85-point lead over second-place Chase. Heading into what would end up being the last race at Kentucky Speedway, the 4 was in search of number 5, and he was looking good. After Jimmy spun out again, Harvick was back on point trying to fend off MTJ. But Matt the Brat's magic had run out as he would spin out and set up a 2-lap dash to the finish. At first, it looked like the same song and dance, Harvick holding off Truex, but coming to the white flag, crispy crunchy chaos was back on the menu.
Here comes Blaney to the inside, 3 wide. Custer to the outside, 4 wide.
White flag waves.
They're banging off one another.
Custer to the lead. Rookie Cole Custer wins Kentucky. Can you believe it?
Cole Custer, in a ballsy, jaw-dropping, balls-dropping move, would take his first and to this day only career Cup win, catapulting his odds at winning Rookie of the Year. Had enough chaos? Well, now it's time for the All-Star race, usually held in Charlotte, but this year at Bristol, because why not? Also, the numbers on the cars got pushed back, because why not? Also, the cars were fitted with underglow, because why not? Oh, that looks like shit. Living up to his father's name, Chase from the same place as $1 Million Bill would take home the dub and the check that came with. And then the real racing resumed. Oh, you thought we were done with chaos. Boom, pow, whack! Jimmy Johnson wrecked. Oh, again, really? Texas was a war of attrition, and in the end, pit strategy would win the day as the RCR tandem aero-blocked their way to a 1-2 finish, with Austin Dillon getting the better of rookie Tyler Reddick and securing his spot in the playoffs. Alright, this video is getting pretty long and we're only halfway through the year, so how about a little lightning round? Another wreckfest of a race at Kansas saw Ryan Preece damn near flip on the backstretch. Surely he'll never actually flip. And Denny Hamlin hold off Brad Kay for win number 5 on the year. In New Hampshire, Jimmy spun, and Brad won. Yay! Another doubleheader, this time in Michigan, saw a Saturday dominated by Kevin Harvick and a Sunday not dominated but still won by Kevin Harvick. Thanks for taking out your teammate, Brad. Then the Cup cars would have their first of 2 cracks at the Daytona road course, the site of Elliott's second points win of the season and his continuation of dominance on any track that has right turns. Then came a doubleheader at Dover, which would see Denny dominate on Saturday for his 6th win of the year and Harvick dominate Sunday for his 7th. Oh yeah, the playoffs, they're about to start. Only 1 race away, and while the regular season championship has long been locked up by Harvick, there's still some spots up for grabs, and despite all of the strife, spins, and super close calls, Jimmy Johnson still sits just 4 points away from a playoff berth. Heading back to Daytona with everything to gain and nothing to lose, all eyes would be on car 48 under the Saturday night lights. Well, actually, eyes would be on 3 cars, the 3 left fighting to get into the playoffs on points, the 21 of Matt DiBenedetto, the 24 of William Byron, and of course the 48 of Jimmy Jam. Heading into this race, the 3 were separated by just 9 points, 9 places on the racetrack. Every spot and every stage point would make the difference, though at a place as chaotic as Daytona, they would also need Lady Luck on their side, and early on she seemed to take the side of Jimmy Johnson, who earned the most stage points between them at 12, while Byron and DiBenedetto could only muster 4 apiece. This brought Jimmy right back into the fold, and while an ill-advised block by Tyler Reddick could have ruined the battle for everyone, all 3 of the playoff hopefuls were able to skate by 1, 2, 3. With all of them still bunched together in the waning laps of the race, it looked like the fight would come all the way down to the finish, but as chaos consumed the race for the win, it would never make it that far, as Jimmy's luck finally ran out.
They're right
Now the 22 goes around.
Hold the brake, hold the brake, hold the brake.
Caution's going to come out now. Jimmy Johnson caught up into the 48.
Yeah, big damage on Jimmy's car.
Could this be it for the 7-time champion?
With everything we've just seen, it'd be generous to say he had any luck at all. If he doesn't get the coronavirus and miss Indianapolis, if he doesn't get disqualified in Charlotte, if he doesn't spin out here or here or here or especially here, he wouldn't even be in this situation. He had some good runs, he was still Jimmy Johnson, but that's the cruelty of reality. Storybook endings are rare, never guaranteed, and for what could be the final time in our lifetimes, us fans had to watch the last chance at a record-breaking 8th championship pull off onto pit road. Even if he had made the playoffs, he wouldn't have come anywhere close to the championship, but it still felt weird. 7 has been the magic number for 46 years now, and the fact that it's been matched twice in the time since is a minor miracle in and of itself. And now, with the teams more leveled out than ever before, it's doubtful we'll ever see another champion of this caliber again. So while no, this didn't impact the scope of this championship, it was still important. It's the last time the record for NASCAR Cup championships has been threatened, and will likely remain that way for a long time to come. At least the team could take solace in their other contender, William Byron, who, with help from other teammate Chase Elliott, would answer the call by notching his first career win. And just like that, against all odds and ordinances saying that they couldn't, NASCAR finished its 26-race regular season on schedule. Now all that was left were 10 more weeks, 10 more races that would crown a champion. At the outset, Kevin Harvick was far and away the favorite. He'd be entering each round with a 54-point advantage and had 2-to-1 odds of winning it all. And he backed those odds up in Darlington, as even with an ill-handling car, he was in 3rd place with just 15 laps to go. Racing for the lead, however, was Chase Elliott, still looking for redemption from May, and Martin Truex, who was clearly the faster car. Now Martin, good old Martin, still had 15 laps to pass Chase Elliott. He could have laid back, he could have prodded him, he had all the time in the world to set up a pass. So what does he do?
In the wall!
Into the wall!
I can defend my driver over a lot of things. This was not one of them. And as the leaders both suffered tire failures, Harvick swooped in to win his 8th of the year, this time in considerably better company than his first.
Well, the first thing I want to say is welcome back, fans.
Finishing second in the race was Austin Dillon, and it wasn't a fluke. He had driven all the way from 36th place to having a shot at the win, and that momentum continued to roll into Richmond, where he once again ran up front, not on pit strategy or luck, but genuine speed. Keep in mind, this is a guy who has never once come anywhere close to a cup, not only fixing to advance, but showing the way. This really deluded some people into thinking he was a genuine contender, but a botched pit road entry spoiled all of it, costing him a critical few seconds that would end up making the difference to Bad Brad, who would score his 4th win of the year. Still, Austin was way safe heading into the cutoff race at Bristol, which would see the playoff eliminations of Matt DiBenedetto, Cole Custer, William Byron, and Ryan Blaney, who just had a miserable first round. It also saw a classic 35-lap battle for the win between old rivals Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick, the latter of which would come out on top, and for the first time since Jimmy Johnson in 07, a driver had won 9 races in a single season. He was pretty happy about that. Less happy was Kyle Busch, tired of Harvick hogging all the trophies as he was still in search of one heading into race number 30 in his hometown of Las Vegas. Well, he'd have to wait a little longer, as instead of him, it was his brother Kurt who would catch a caution at the perfect time, hold off the field, and propel himself from the bottom of the board to a surprise lock in the 3rd round. And thank goodness he did that, because Talladega wasn't so kind to him. In fact, Talladega wasn't really kind to anyone, as 27 cars would find themselves involved in accidents, including 10 of the 12 playoff drivers. One of the other 2 was Denny Hamlin, who had hung around at the back of the pack to avoid trouble. That strategy paid off as he was on the front row for the final restart. But leading them to the white flag was Matt DiBenedetto, fighting for the Wood brothers' 100th win and his very first. Coming down the backstretch, he was pushed out to a sizable lead, but heading into 3, the pack behind him closed up. Remember all that talk about chaos? You know the drill.
Now the 24, a big run. He slides. They make more contact. 3 wide as they come out of 4. And as they go across the stripe, a photo finish.
the nod by 23 one-thousandths of a second.
Holy moly, there's a lot to unpack here, so much so that I, being a time-traveling wizard, have also made a video about this race. Now, to the uninitiated, this seems pretty cut and dry. Denny beat Matt to the finish line, but there is another line in play here, the double yellow line. It rests right on the apron, and ever since 2001, it's been illegal to cross below it to advance your position. If even one molecule of your left side tire goes over, that's a penalty. Or at least most of the time it is. The one exception to the rule is if you break it to avoid an accident, but like every other rule NASCAR has ever come up with, they've proven that they have no idea how to enforce it. Here's Carl Edwards very clearly avoiding a wreck, even losing positions in the process and still getting penalized. And here's Dale Jr. willingly crossing below it to take the damn lead and getting off scot-free. Yet NASCAR has no clue how to enforce this, and that's been proven by how they handled this race. Here's Denny Hamlin having a damn field day while there's clearly room to come back up, and he gets away with no penalty. Meanwhile, Matt DiBenedetto, who never crossed over the line himself, ended up getting bopped for forcing someone else below it, and thus was relegated from 2nd to 21st. Come on, that's just cruel. Of course, we all got upset, complained for a while, and moved on to the next controversy, but in the meantime, Denny Hamlin was locked in come time for the Charlotte Roval, the first ever Cup Series race to utilize wet weather tires, at least for the first stint. Once the track dried up, Ty Dillon was the first to put on slicks and use them to win his third career stage, but most of the pressure was placed on Kyle Busch. He was notoriously bad at the Charlotte road course and entered this race 21 points below the cut line. And while he did put up a valiant effort, too many setbacks meant that along with Eric Almirola, Clint Boyer, and Austin Dillon, Kyle Busch was eliminated in the second round, the first time in 5 years he wouldn't make it to the championship race. On the flip side, Chase Elliott kept his crown as king of the road by notching his 4th straight road course win and his 2nd at the Roval. And just like that, 4 races and 2 rounds to go. The round of 8 opener at Kansas would see a brutal engine failure for Kurt Busch that immediately tanked his title chances, and Kevin Harvick, clearly the fastest car on track, had to follow Joey Logano for the final 40 laps. And when I say he had to, I mean he had to. With the limited horsepower NASCAR swore up and down was making the racing better, he couldn't pull out of line to even attempt a pass. Just look at his throttle through the corner. He's not lifting at all. They may as well have been driving go-karts. And with that, Logano won his first race since March and was the first to lock himself into the finale, while Harvick would have to wait for another shot in Texas. And he did have a pretty good shot. He had won this race for the past 3 consecutive years and was placed on the pole for this year's. If anyone was coming out of here with a hat and a pair of 6-shooters, it was gonna be him.
Harvick's into the wall. Harvick tags the outside wall.
Or maybe not. As one last middle finger from Mother Nature for the year, 3 straight days of rain pushed the remainder of the race to Wednesday, when Matt Kenseth DoorDashed McDonald's to Bubba Wallace, Christopher Bell gave Levine Family Racing a podium finish in their final home race, and of all people, it would be Kyle Busch, if not fighting for a championship, at least collecting a win, extending a streak of 16 straight seasons with at least 1 victory. As for Harvick, while this round hadn't been going his way, he still held a 42-point cushion to the cut line heading to Martinsville. He could have clinched a spot in the championship race on stage points alone, but regardless of how it was done, that's all he had to do. Put together, at the very least, a competent performance.
A massive development in the playoffs. Kevin Harvick, the regular season champion, everyone's favorite, had a flat left rear tire.
Okay, maybe getting in on stage points was overzealous, but there's still a lot of race left. He's still got time to rally. In the meantime, the race for the win boiled down to Martin Truex, the defending winner of this race, trying to dig himself out of a James Small-sized hole, and Chase Elliott, who, while not desperate per se, could certainly use a win here today. After a late yellow, Elliott's jackman, TJ Semke, made the save of the season by resetting on the wall and avoiding a penalty. Meanwhile, Truex's crew put together a suspiciously quick pit stop, especially for them, and on the ensuing restart, he would find out why.
Feels like the right front is loose on the 19, battling for a win, and the pit crew may have left the right front loose on that stop.
With his right front wobbling like a son of a bitch, he was forced to concede the fight to Elliott, and as the lead grew, all eyes turned back to Kevin Harvick. Despite the advantage he had heading in, his race was so abysmally awful that his monster advantage had crumbled to a 1-point deficit in the closing laps. And with Hamlin's teammates setting up a blockade for him, that 1 point would have to be earned by Harvick. For all of the history he had made this year, all of the records he had matched and beaten, his chances at a championship would all come down to whether or not he could pass Kyle Busch. And in this one instance, in this one critical moment, history frowned on him.
Oh, Harvick spins the 18!
And Harvick is going to be out of the playoffs.
The biggest shame of all is that for the first time, the championship race was being held in Phoenix, a place where Kevin Harvick just happens to have the most wins of any driver ever. They call him the Cactus King. It's like this title was destined to be his, but as it turns out, it wasn't meant to be. Though I hope Harvick's 2020 season isn't remembered for that, because as the man said,
These championships aren't like winning like Petty and Earnhardt used to win them.
And 4 years later, that still rings true. But for now, Chase Elliott was jubilant. He had gotten his 4th win of the year and would be racing for a title against Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, and Denny Hamlin. At long last, this tumultuous, chaotic roller coaster of a year could be laid to rest with one last race for a championship. Before the race could get underway, however, there were some send-offs to commemorate of Matt Kenseth, Clint Bowyer, and Jimmy Johnson, who if not running his last race ever, would at least be running his last in the 48. And as at Daytona, he would start that race at the front of the field, along with teammate Chase Elliott, who would also have to return to his actual starting spot in last place. A limited capacity crowd saluted the living legends as they prepared to find out who NASCAR's newest champion would be, though few of them, or anyone else for that matter, would have predicted that heading into this year and starting this race at the tail end, it would be the 24-year-old who would become just that, a champion.
Is that the passing of the torch right there?
Yeah, that could be handoff.
With Dale Earnhardt Jr. never quite putting it all together, it felt good to see the new face of the sport take the crown. And although his last season hadn't lived up to the career that came before it, Jimmy was still able to sneak away with one last top 5 finish. And would you look at that? He's still doing it 5 years later, and so is his team. With Johnson's departure from Hendrick came an opening that would be filled by a fresh-faced Kyle Larson, and he, along with crew chief Cliff Daniels, would put together an even more dominant season than Harvick's, winning Hendrick their 2nd consecutive championship and still going strong to this day. Speaking of Harvick, this was his last serious shot at a title, as he wouldn't return to victory lane for 687 days, and then another 7 days, and in the year after, he retired with just one championship that could have and should have been much more. As for Chase, he's still in search of his 2nd chip, although he did just come off a season where he had the best average finish of anyone, on par with the average from his championship run. So who knows, maybe soon, Dawsonville's favorite son will be due for title number 2. But at least in this moment, he, along with the entirety of NASCAR, could enjoy the culmination of a year that transcended expectation, that saw the luxuries we take for granted and reminded us that they are just that, luxuries, momentary distractions from a life that is inherently random and unforgiving. But it's not about the scares or the setbacks or the savagery of reality, but how you face it, how you stare it down and find ways to rise above. As much as it felt like it could stop at any moment, the world kept on spinning, fueled in equal parts by the human spirit and Sunoco racing fuel. And we've kept on spinning ever since. Thanks for watching. By the way, have you ever wanted to be on a race car? No, not like that. I mean like your name on a NASCAR car. Well, here's your chance. If you click the GoFundMe link in the description and donate $25, your name will be featured on Tyler Tomasi's number 66 Elly Productions MBM Mustang, which will be running at Bristol on April 12th. You'll also receive a shout out in my paint scheme stream on March 27th. Still accepting submissions, by the way. But this offer is only available for the next 9 days, so make sure you pounce on it quickly. And I hope to see you out on the track. Again, not like that.